Give me 30 seconds and we'll get started. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to do a much more in-depth talk with you guys about underwriting, specifically credit scores and that sort of thing, because I don't really think that it really has hit home with a lot of brokers who submit a deal. They see a FICO score that they're being told is correct, and all of a sudden they get a much higher rate than what they anticipated. So I'm gonna kind of break it down over the next 15 or 20 minutes, and then you guys can chime in afterwards and ask me questions, that sort of thing. But let's talk about a client that you submit, and they have a decent FICO, but they got multiple positions. How is a high FICO score treated if the client has multiple MCA positions? That's a very fair and important question. FICOs with no positions, of course, and you got really high scores, that really helps determine the rate, and probably as much as anything other than the industry type. But a client that has, let's say two current positions with other MCA companies that are paying weekly or daily on there, then that FICO is set over here. I'm just saying figuratively, it's set on the side. They don't worry about that because they want to go look at a couple of things. They want to look at, number one, what are their daily balances? Because if they have higher than 25% of their entire revenue going to pay back other positions, then it becomes a much higher, and anything above 33% is, and some will go to the 40%, but you don't want to pay that rate. But if they got 30% of their monthly revenue going toward two positions that they're paying right now, nobody in their right mind in this industry is going to go and just pay off those two. All they're doing is paying off debt, taking the debt upon themselves, and then they realize that the small business person doesn't have the ability to use that money because it's going toward paying off something. So it's really not helping their business. They're about where they were. It actually could harm their business if they didn't have some money that they could use. The second thing, besides daily balances and the percentages, they're going to look at what type of business are we talking about here? I mean, if it's a large construction company, that's okay. They could have six positions because most of the time they're not using that large percentage of their revenue to pay this off. But if it's a trucking company, which is one of the really highest risk industries out there, I told you last week that some of our lenders have anywhere from a 43 to a 63% or 48 to 63% default rate in that industry. It surprises me that they're still willing to fund in that industry. So business type comes into play. And then when they look at the revenue used, the business type, who did they get the funding with? I'm not going to mention the name of a couple, but there's a few funders that if you got funding with them, nobody wants to fund behind them because they know that these are gouging funders. They don't play. If you miss one payment, they're liable to just come in and just freeze your account and do all kind of crazy stuff that this industry doesn't need to have happen, but they do it. So when you got a high FICO, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the greatest rate because you've got multiple positions. Let's talk about now a high FICO, but the industry is not very good, but you don't have multiple positions out there. Then if they're like a trucking industry with a high FICO, though the high FICO is really going to help them in regards to getting a better rate, the industry itself can really harm them and not getting the same rate that someone with a 700 FICO that's home health care or retail or something of that nature. So revenue on these situations are going to play more of an important role than the FICO score is. So you can't just automatically think in your mind, I got a great FICO, so I'm gonna get a great score. They're gonna get great rates. There's a lot of factors that play into it. But now let's talk about a low FICO in industry types that are great. In this case, if you got a great industry, your revenue is going to really play heavy in here to overcome that FICO score. So guys, if you got a low FICO, but you're in a great industry, we're going to get better offers sometimes than a high FICO in a very, very, very risky industry. So it's not a blanket policy in this industry that, hey, I got a 700 FICO, so I'm going to get the best rate. It has to do with all these other factors. And here's an example of how lenders see their investment of their funds. And I want you to kind of put yourself in the place of that lender. Number one, a lender wants to earn about 19 to 25% off of their money, whether that's over 9 months or 2 years. That's what they kind of want to earn, I'm seeing. And even taking 19%, I want you to understand they still got to pay us so that we can pay you the commissions that you deserve. So even at a 19 to 25%, they're going to be adding on their cost of they got to take in mind cost of the commissions they got to pay out, which is going to bump this thing up close to like 27, 29% at 19 or low 30s. But they also have what they call the cost of underwriting and their own internal staff. Sometimes, to achieve what they are trying to do, they have to put lender fees on there and make that happen. So just understand that if they have $100,000 on the street, and as that's the buy rate, in other words, that's what they want. That's what they want to make. On that 100,000, they want to make bring in 119 to $125,000 back for their risk of putting a non-collateralized signature funding on the street. Now, remember, if this thing defaults and they don't pay it, then they're not losing $100,000 in investment money. They're losing $100,000 plus about 12 to really could be 14 to 16% because they got their internal costs and everything on there. So on $100,000, they're gonna wind up losing $125,000 on that because of all the costs it took for them to do all this underwriting and the commissions that they're paying out. Then their internal costs, to be honest with you, on an A piece of paper isn't as much as a B and C, because A paper, they're not having to do, I mean, they know very quickly through their algorithms and all whether it's a good paper. They don't have to go out and look up all these different past fundings and that sort of thing. If you might not know this, but on A paper, there's usually no funding call. There's no bank verification at all. So if we can get an A paper offer and the client doesn't take it, I scratch my head. I mean, I think I may have spoke about this last week. I had someone who had 100,000, or well, it's actually, I think 150,000. And I showed David, I said, look, it's a 1.23 rate or either a 1.28, and that's over 18 months. That comes out to 17, 18% a year for the money. And the person turned it down, thought it was too expensive. Well, I mean, that just blows my mind. So it really comes to the point where A lenders are basically now a little bit tighter than they were before, but they still have those really great rates. Then there are B and C lenders out there that carry the higher risk. And I don't even call lenders a D lender. They're either B and C, and they'll take everybody, and they're going to be higher rate situations. And the higher risk paper, they want to earn about 30% on their money. In other words, if they and sometimes even 35%. So that means our buy rate could be anywhere from 30 to 35% before they ever put on the other commissions. And then these are the guys that are going to put anywhere from 2.5 up to 5% on as lender fees. Lender fees are not fees that we get anything from. That's their internal cost. So they're compensating for their costs because they want to make that 30 to 35% on their investment. And then when they add these lender fees to it, that comes off the top when the money's wired. So if it's $100,000 and there's $3,000 in lender fees, the client's going to receive $97,000. That's how they look at it. But I want you to look at, well, I'll get to that in a minute. In most cases, let's just say that that lender looks at that FICO score, and they look at a FICO score less important than an A lender would look. But a B lender is going to look at everything I just told you, but they're also going to look at all past histories. They're going to run all types of reports in a matter of minutes to find out who these people have paid in the past and who they haven't. I've got one right now that came in this morning. I'm looking at it, and they're doing it between $900,000 and $1.1 million a month. It's a great looking file, but I've already gotten 2 declines this morning already because they're on data merge. Data merge is a place that you don't want to be. It means that you fraudulently sent in bank statements that you probably altered or you defaulted in the past or something of that nature. Well, I've learned in this industry, unlike most folks, that doesn't necessarily mean all the time. It probably means 90% of the time, but all the time that one of those two things happens. There are literally lenders out there that will put people on data merge when they get ticked off with them for missing one payment. That's crazy. And I can overcome sometimes that kind of stuff. But I can tell you the risk is really, really high on this file, but I think I'm going to get an offer from someplace as long as they haven't defaulted. That is the ultimate sin in this industry. If you ever default, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get anything in this industry with anybody. Now, I want to talk to you about a B and C lender that has $10,000 that they put out on the street. That $10,000 defaults. Doesn't matter if it defaults month 1, 2, or 3. They never pay it off. What did that lender lose? Well, they lost the $10,000. They've lost their whatever their cost was to the ISO, and they lost the internal cost. So for them to make up a $10,000 default, it's going to take them between 8 and 9 fundings at $10,000 to break even. I know you can't really fathom that because you say, well, why would it take that? Well, they still got to make their money on, because these are all new investment money each and every time. But to make up their losses, it really does take 8 to 9 of those. Now, sometimes they can make it all back up on a large deal, but that's not how they look at it, and they don't try to underwrite their losses into any one particular deal. So I want you to keep in mind, if that was your money on the street and you're giving it to them with no collateral, just on their signature, would you do it for 19, 20, 22 points, 23 points? Don't think, I personally would need to make about 40 or so if it was my money sitting out there, because that's how high that risk is. Lender fees, by the way, run 0 to 5% normally. This is the fees that, as I told you earlier, that cost the underwriting and cost of the lender underwriting and staff cost. All these reports, every time they do it, send out a decision logic link, it costs them a buck or so or less. But what a lot of these people, you have to send 2 and 3 different links out. And then on top of that, every time they draft money out of their account, whether it's daily or monthly, that's a fee they got to pay. And then all their internal cost of running LexisNexis and all the other reports that they run, it just takes a lot of money to run a funding company. There are funders out there that will take a lot of smaller little tiny deals, and they're going to charge as much as 5 to 8% in lender fees. We try to stay away from those. I've got most of the B and C lenders at 2.5 to 4 points and tell them we won't pay any more or we can't fund with them. So I'm telling you all this so you can understand the costs that are involved in underwriting this deal and what all the factors are that they got to put in there. Another thing that rates can be affected by is inquiries. If you are a business and you have 100 inquiries, 30 inquiries, and that happens easily when a broker, especially these rogue ones that go out and they're submitting to everybody, they're not like us. We don't do hard pulls ever. Under any circumstance do our lenders do that. They all do a soft look at the FICO, so they're not looking at the entire credit report. But that's not the case with a ton of these lenders out there that will let any agent come and get a contract with them because they know that they'll give you the worst reputation in the world if anybody ever defaults. So just keep in mind these lender fees are helping the lender decide on the call. But on their inquiries, if you have been in the space and you're trying to for weeks and you keep going from one to the other and you don't take this account, this offer, but so you go to another and you keep playing one against the other, that will affect your rate because and by the way, all the lenders know when you submit one to another lender, I already know that you submitted it. I already know when I get that, they immediately tell me that it's been submitted. So it may not be you as the broker that's doing it, but that means that person is shopping. That means that you're not the only broker that person has. And this almost always happens on the leads that you get from online, people you don't know. But when you go belly to belly, face to face, meet, greet, and inform, you don't see this ever. As a matter of fact, I was told by a new lending group that the reason they like our files is that they don't see them from 3 and 4 other brokers out there. These are files that they never see come across their desk, and that's really a huge compliment to what you guys do. Now, multiple owners on the application when it comes to credit. We have to have at least an owner with at least 51% ownership on the application if you're not going to have any other owners. When that occurs, then they're only looking at that one owner FICO. However, what they're going to do is they're going to show proof of ownership on all of those cases when it's less than 75% or whatever. And when you have proof of ownership, we ask for a tax return so we can see that proof of ownership on a Schedule C or a K1. And then if there is other people on there that own more than 25%, they'll usually want their social security number, driver's license, and that sort of thing, so we can add them to the agreement. However, if they refuse to do that, as long as I get a corporate board resolution that says that person with 51% or more has the right to enter into these agreements. That wouldn't matter if it was their spouse, and that wouldn't matter if you had a bunch of people owning 10, but when someone owns, over 25% of the company, they want them to at least know that they're getting funds. Past bankruptcy is another thing on these rates that make a big difference. If they have filed bankruptcy in the last 5 years, they probably aren't going to get funded. And if it's been past that, it's got to be dismissed. It's got to be discharged. People can file a reorganization and then it's discharged, and they can prove that. Then and the business is going good again, then we can get those people funded. But when there's a Chapter 7 or whatever, it's pretty much going to be tough for the next 5 years for them to get funding with us. Each lender has their own internal scoring method, so it's not a cookie cutter. There's a couple of big lenders out there. I'm hesitant to ever name names here, but if I name their name, you'd hear them all the time. They have a cookie cutter approach. I know that if I submit something to them and it fits in this cookie cutter spot, it's going to be 17,000. It's going to be 110 payments. It's going to be this, and it's going to be that way every time. That's why you can't afford to to submit to just one place because of the cookie cutter approach that a lot of them have. They spit out an offer and before they even do 100% of the underwriting, and that's just not good business. But sometimes we have to go with that because it's the only offer. And the algorithms that lenders use are all affected by the information that they put in to create those algorithms. So, you know, but the bottom line on rates, there are just way too many variables for me to ever look at you. And when you contact me and say, well, this Wade, this is the type of business. They say they got a 700 credit score. And let's say it is, what's it going to cost them? No idea, because I just went over some of the variables on creating rates, and that doesn't include all the other ifs, ands, and buts that are involved. So me giving you a cookie cutter approach and a thing, I can give you my best professional estimate when you call me and ask me what do I think they can get, and I'll tell you that, and I'm always going to tell you lower. But I can tell you in A lending, we will always get between 100 and 200% of what they're doing monthly. But if it's not an A lender, it's all over the board. It could be 125%. It could be 50%. But I will tell you, the one thing I'm really excited about is the up to 10K in under 10 minutes, because they don't care about FICO. They don't care about anything but what they get through their algorithm that's attached to their underwriting system, which is done by looking at bank statements. And that, to me, folks, is a home run that's going to take your business to the moon. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. I'll be glad to take any questions. You know, I watched a thing on TV. What is it? All these jokers where these four friends go out and they always do different crazy stuff, and something they're in their ear telling them what to do. Impractical jokers. And they always say a raise of hands of everybody who got anything out of this. And I'm afraid to do that right now because I don't have any questions. So you might not have gotten anything out of it. So if there's no questions, Morgan, I guess I'm gonna shut this down.
Yeah, I don't see any hands up. If you have a question, use the virtual hand raise. We can wait maybe one more minute. Oh, we got one. There we go. James Doswell, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, James.
We love you, Wade. Don't worry about it. Hands or no hands, okay? We love you, bruh. Talk later.
Thank you, man. All right, guys. Oh, we got Chris.
All right, Chris, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you so much today, Wade, for sharing. And again, I know this is a tough question to answer because there's so many variables involved. What are the most positions that funding would be acceptable to, say, based off of a good rated industry and a FICO score of 700? Like, I'll give you an example. They already have 5 positions.
Yep. We'll go, you'll never get above a 6. I've done 1 6 position ever. Most of them are 3 to 4. But they'll go as high as they need to go up to 6, as long as the ratio of monies paid into those other positions, Chris, don't exceed that magical 35% or whatever that number is. If it hits that number, and you're using that much of your monthly income revenue to pay back other funding, then they're not going to put themselves in jeopardy by putting you that 6th position. However, if they may have 4 positions that are all getting ready to be paid off, and when you do your math on all of them, it just doesn't add up to any, over 20%, 22, 25%. Then, oh yeah, man, they'll be able to get that position if it's a good industry.
They're currently using 20% of monthly revenue. The shortest one will be paid off in 7 months, and the other one is the rest of the remaining positions are anywhere from 3 to 5 years. My other question is based on that.
Well, let me stop you there. If they're paid off in 3 to 5 years, they're not MCAs. We don't care about any other loans that they have. I could care less if they got 100 bank loans out. That bank loans is not what we're talking about. We're talking about daily and weekly payments. There is no such thing as a 5-year MCA. That doesn't exist. So they won't even come into play.
No, my mistake for not clarifying. Those are bank loans.
But then it wouldn't matter. We don't care about bank loans.
Okay, so then, based on that, say they weren't bank loans, but they were other positions that would be taken into account. Would the interest rate reflect that because we're coming in at a 5th or 6th position?
Well, I don't even know what interest rate you're talking about because we don't have interest rate, but I'm just making a point here by saying that, Chris. I know you know that. We don't do interest. We're factor based. We have a cost of funds that has nothing to do with interest. Is a rate that I mean, I remember back when I had my old leases when I was in my 20s, I leased a car and I had a factor rate. That's what these are. So they're not interest rates. So the cost of the funds, if you have a lot of positions, will be higher. And you'll never, by the way, you will never get, if we're going to be a 6th position and we can't really buy it, that nobody buys out more than 2. No, nobody does. And if we can't buy it all the way to 0, because unless it's like you said, there's a bunch of other little ones, we'd give them the money to pay off these other ones, but we wouldn't buy them out. Then the interest rate, the factor rate that you're talking about will be disproportionate to what the FICO would show, only because that kind of goes out the window. You got some, if you got 6 positions, you actually have a business management problem more than you have anything else to take that kind of money. And we would tie them up on an agreement on the 6th position that you can't take from anybody else, so we can call the note. Actually, that's in every contract, but nobody ever enforces it at all. So, you know, it would be all over the board what that rate would. But I will also tell you that in most cases, on a 3rd, 4th, and 5th position and 6th, you cannot get funding more than the last funding that you had.
You know, and again, thank you so much. Just hearing what you shared, this was a huge eye opener to me. I'm always speaking with bankers. So I just realized now that when I'm speaking to companies, sometimes I am using interest, which is irrelevant to what we're doing. So that was a huge eye opener that you just shared with me. Yeah, it's the factoring. Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much, Wade.
All right.
All right. Awesome. Next we've got Jimmy. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then we'll go to Carolyn.
Hi.
Jimmy?
Okay, yeah. Sorry, it took me a little while to unmute myself. Right, Wade, I think I'm kind of in the same mindset as the previous gentleman there. So maybe you could help me understand a little bit, because, you know, my background has been more in working with, you know, banks and other lenders that they use you know, asset to commercial mortgages and all that. So just to help me understand, when it comes to MCAs and all that, because I know that you mentioned there are a couple of players out there whose name you won't mention that you know, sound like they are pretty rough players. So when it comes to MCA, because I know like with mortgage, if you have a mortgage, you go refinance that pays off the existing mortgage. Does that happen with MCA or not at all?
No, it happens quite often. We'll pay up to 2 positions off, but only if they have enough revenue coming in to do so. In other words, I got a pizza place that we're giving $60,000 to. They have 2 positions. They got one that they only owe about $8,000 on, and one they owe about $6,000. We're just gonna pay them both off and then take it out of the proceeds that we send to them so they can have 1 position. But that doesn't happen in our space that often. And you know why? Because companies like David Allen Capital, like us, Bank Breeze, they're lazy. Those people are lazy. They're lazy, and they don't take the time to work with the underwriters and construct the proper funding method for that client. They'll just leave those $200 here and $100 a day there. That's $300 or $400 a day that doesn't really need to be out there. And if you're giving somebody, let's say $50,000, why not pay off and only give them $37,000? But that way, you don't have 3 different payments every single month. So most in our industry, it's not that often that you hear a lot of payoffs, but I try to make that happen as much as I can.
Okay. Glad to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, Carolyn, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Wade. I'd like to say thank you for doing this. I'm learning so much, and I hope you will continue this. But I just have a quick question. In regards to the equipment financing, does the rates and how you underwrite it, is that the same, or do they look at it differently because the equipment is collateral based?
Yeah, it's not even, it's not the same as MCA. As a matter of fact, you're going to have, 7 to 19% real interest. These are interest, not factors in the financing of equipment. It's not a lease of the equipment, it's financing it. But I will tell you, this particular equipment financer that we have chosen to partner with will not fund anybody who has an MCA. And so that's kind of a tough thing for me to swallow, but on the same token, I totally understand. It doesn't mean they can't get one afterwards, but they want a clean slate before they do. And then they won't fund over $200,000 either. But they do, anywhere from 2 to 7 year deals because they're all interest based. Okay. See, I guess I answered it. Okay. And then we got 2 more hands up, and then that'll be it.
Yep, it looks like Jimmy's got his hand up again. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to what the previous lady just asked you. So help me understand, because I know that you mentioned at the beginning that trucking industry is kind of hard when it comes to funding, with MCAs and all that. But I know that a lot of times, trucking industry, they need equipment financing, like for trucks and all that. Did I hear you correctly when you said that if the trucking company has an MCA, you won't be able to do equipment financing for them? Or did I misunderstand you?
I can't do equipment financing for anything in the trucking industry. Almost nobody's taking those anymore, and we won't fund any kind of vehicle that that requires a registration and a license that you can drive. I mean, I got an ambulance service right now that wants ambulances, but I can't do that. I can get those things, but here's my problem. We want to be good. We want to be we don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I believe that we're becoming great at what we're doing in the funding space. And I don't want to get into all these other leasing. There's just no money in it. And you work really hard to make 3 points that we got to share with you guys and share with DAC and share. You guys get the most, and it's just not worth the time and the effort and the problems that are going to come after that. So in the trucking industry, we can't even fund anybody when it comes to equipment. But when it comes to equipment outside the trucking industry, if you already have an MCA, you're not going to get the equipment funded.
Mm-hmm. So what about the restaurants? Are those good candidates for equipment financing or not?
Do what now?
Restaurants, are they good candidates for equipment financing?
Or who good? I'm misunderstanding. Who are you at? Who are you saying are they?
I'm asking if restaurants are good candidates for equipment financing.
Restaurants.
Oh, restaurant. Oh, they're excellent. Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't understand what you're saying. And I guess that's everybody. So thank you so much for your time today. And next Wednesday, I'll put a really exciting topic together that I already have on my mind. I'll let David announce it probably Friday or Monday, okay? Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you being here. Y'all have a blessed day.